Sanhedrin Daf Yomi Aleph, words with many meanings. Yesh aim למסורת. You know that in the Torah we often find a situation of a Keri-Ktiv, where the Torah is written in one way, a word is spelt in a specific way, but when the Baal Kori reads it, he reads it differently. And in every Chumash you've got a mark as to how the word has to be read in situations where the reading doesn't match the way it's written. That's called a Keri-Ktiv, the way you read it and the way it's written. And words generally, especially in the Torah, have multiple layers of meanings, and sometimes these meanings are even contradictory. How do we manage that contradiction? It brings us to an interesting shaila that Rabbi Moshe Feinstein deals with back in 1953. He writes the shaila to Rabbi Greenblatt. Rabbi Greenblatt was himself a massive posek. Many, if not the majority of Rabbi Moshe Feinstein's tshuvas are to Rabbonim. Barabatim didn't ask Rabbi Moshe Feinstein tshuvas, shaydas generally. We've talked beforehand about the localization of psak, certainly in the way it used to be. You would ask your local Rav. The Rav knows you, he knows your family, he knows your situation, he knows the community, and he can paskin for you, but sometimes the Rav needed clarification in matters of psak. There were some new issues that came, so the Rav would then put the shaila to Rav Moshe, and Rav Moshe would give the Rav the guidelines, and the Rav would then deal with it in his community. Rav Greenblatt was a Talmud of Rav Moshe Feinstein. He lived in Memphis, Tennessee. He was the Rav in Memphis, Tennessee for many, many years, and he was a Talmud of Rav Moshe Feinstein and also a posek in his own right. This is a very, very long tshuva, at the end of which he deals with the case of where a piece of wax falls on a word in the Torah, and it's Shabbos, you can't take the wax off, but you can't see the word. The Baal Kori can't read that word, so you have to close the Sefer Torah and open a new one. What happens, he asks, if the wax is on a word which is a Keri-Ktiv? It's written one way and read a different way. So in any case, you're not reading it out of the Torah, you're reading it out of your knowledge. So if you're reading it out of your knowledge, do you have to take the wax off, or can you use the Sefer Torah? And he answers, "Umistabed hu adin b'kri uchtiv kegon al tevat yisgalena." We have the posuk in the klalos of the klalot, the curses in Parashat Ki Tavo. A man will get married. V'ish acher yisgalena is written, but we read it yishkavena. Another man will live with the person's wife, chas v'sholom, and that's a terrible klala. It's a terrible curse in Parashat Ki Tavo. So it's written yisgalena, and we read it yishkavena. So what happens if the word yishgalena is covered with wax? Nami yitztarech lotzi acheret, you would also have to take it out. You can't say, well, in any case, I'm reading it from knowledge, I'm not reading it from the words. The words are different from what I'm saying. Because shebahalacha ne'ema shetevat yisgalena bekan yikare yishkavena. Because the halacha says the way to read yishkavena is yisgalena. You've got to still read the word, you just pronounce it differently. Not that you say the word yishkavena orally by heart. You've got to read it out, which is very difficult, isn't it? You're not reading it out. The fact is you're not reading it out. The fact is you are saying it orally. What does Rabbi Moshe Feinstein mean? And someone to say that the Brisker Rav disagrees with this psak. The Brisker Rav is on a piece in Vayetchanan where Moshe says to Hashem, Hashem Elokim. And the word Elokim is written Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, but pronounced Elokim. Normally, the name is written Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, and we pronounce it Adonai, we say. But in the case of here in Vayetchanan and a few other places in the Torah, it's written Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, God's normal name, but we pronounce it Elokim. And Rashi says on that, Rachum Badin. Elokim, it's written Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, it's pronounced Elokim. Elokim means justice, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei means kindness and mercy. So this means in law, Hashem will be merciful. We talked about that just the other day in terms of being able to synthesize the different parts of justice, that there's shalom and there's emet and there's din. So there's rachamim and din in the way Hashem responds. Asks the Ramban, but it doesn't say Elokim, it says Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. So where does Rashi see the din? And the Ramban goes on to a different way, and the Brisker Rav explains Rashi. And he says about Sha'anu Kor'inoto Elokim Enzu Kriyato Shel Hashem HaNichtav. It's different. When we say Adonai instead of Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, that's the way to pronounce God's name, because you can't pronounce the Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. But when we say Elokim, because the Nukudot on Yud Kei Vav Kei are the Nukudot, the vowels on the Nukudot of Elokim, although the consonants are Yud Kei Vav Kei. In that case, when we read it, Ein zu kriyato shel Hashem hanichtav. You're not reading what is written. Rak havi kemo kol Keri-Ktiv sheba Torah. This is like a Keri-Ktiv that we've just been talking about, where a word is written one way and pronounced another. She'ena kriyato shel aktiv. You're not reading the written word. Raki kriya acheret legamri. It's a different word altogether. You're not reading it from the word. And he goes on to explain that particular case and explain Rashi's approach using that principle. But we see here that in the wording of the Brisker Rav, he seems to be wording it very differently from Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. Rabbi Moshe Feinstein says we're instructed to read the Ktiv in the way of the Keri, to read it in a particular way. But you're reading it, and that's why if it's covered with wax, you've got to take out another Sefer Torah. The Brisker Rav says, no, it's a different word altogether. You're not reading it. And there are poskim who want to say from here, the Brisker Rav would hold that you don't have to take out another Sefer Torah. If the wax is covering a word which is a Keri-Ktiv, Yisgalena is covered with wax, you don't have to take out another Sefer Torah because you're not reading it in any case. It's a different word altogether. And I would argue that if we understand our Gemara on Daf Daled and the principles of Yesh Eim LeMasoret, Yesh Eim LeMikra, this is one of the sugyot where the Gemara goes into the question of when there's a contradiction between Keri and Ktiv, where the way it's written and the way it's pronounced traditionally are different. Which one is the dominant one? This is one of the sugyot. If you understand the underlying principle of this sugya, you'll understand that there's no way the Brisker Rav could be differing with Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. The differences are subtle, but not any difference that would make a difference in halacha in the case of the word being covered with wax. And here's why. So in Parshat Shemot, we have the case, we've done it before, every case that will come, no matter what it is, Ad ha-Elohim yavod v'ashnehem, you bring them to the matters to the judges, Asher yashiyun Elohim yeshalem shnayim l're'ehu, and which, however, when the person who the judges decide against will pay double to his friend in a case of theft. Says our Gemara at the bottom of Gimel Amud Bet, Tanu Rabbanan, Dinei Mamonot Bishlosha, Rebbe Omer B'chamisha. There's a machloket between the Rabbanan and Rebbe, whether in monetary cases you need 3 people, as we've learned up till now, or 5 people. You need 5 judges, not 3. Hainu Taima de Rebbe, the Gemara goes on to say, this is the reason for Rebbe. Asher Yashiun Elokim Trey. It says Asher Yashiun in the plural. Elokim, that's 2. Ne'amar Elokim lamata v'ne'amar Elokim lamala. It says Elokim here, and it says Elokim earlier in the pasuk. Ki uzeh ad ha-Elokim yavod v'ashneim asher yashiyun Elokim. So we see the word coming twice. It's in the plural. In both cases, it's 2. Ma lamata shnayim af lamala shnayim. In both cases, it's talking 2. Ve'in beit din shakul, and you can't have a beis din of 4 people because you need a majority. So you add another one, Mosifin Aleim. That's how Rebbe reasons out from the Psukim that you need 5 Dayanim. The Rabbanan, what about the Rabbanan who say you only need 3? Yarshi Anktiv. The Vav is missing in the way the word Yarshi'un is written. There should be a Vav between the Ayin and the Nun, and as you see, there isn't a Vav between the Ayin and the Nun. That's to tell you that although grammatically it's the plural, don't learn it as plural, learn it as singular. And that means there's only 1 judge there, so that means 1 there, and then Elokim is written earlier in the plural, so you've got 2 judges plus 1 judge, that's 3 judges, that's how the Chachamim learn it. Omar Rabbi Yitzchak bar Yosef, Omar Rabbi Yochanan, Rebbe v'Rabbi Yehuda ben Roetz v'Rabbi Shammai v'Rabbi Shimon v'Rabbi Akiva, all of these great Tanaim, kulhu sviriluhu yesh eim lemikra. They all hold, this is a phrase we have all over Shas, yesh eim lemikra, meaning the dominant interpretation that we use in order to extrapolate dinim, extrapolate laws from the verse. The predominant one is the way it's read, lemikra, the way you pronounce it, not the way it's written. Rebbe had Amran, Rebbe is from this case of Yashiyun, we see that's Rebbe. Rabbeinu Yonah asks a very powerful question which he doesn't really answer. If you hold that you follow the way it's written, why do you read it differently? And vice versa, if you follow the way that you read it, why is it written differently? Why would the Torah do this? Why is the Torah trying to confuse us? What's going on? So if the Brisker Rav meant what people want to say that he meant, that when you pronounce it, it has nothing to do with the word over there. It's a different word altogether. So write the word that it is. Rabbeinu Yonah's kasha makes it impossible to understand that. So we need to understand the word. It's always bothered me until this morning. Why do we say yesh aim lemikra? How do you translate yesh aim lemikra? What does that mean? There's a mother. The pronunciation is the mother. The written word is the mother. Say it's the main one, say it's the one we follow, say you ignore the other one. What's the mother doing here? What's important is a mother gives birth. So the very words tell us, yesh aim lemikra means the pronunciation and the written word are related. They're not two separate things. That's why I'm suggesting the Brisker Rav can't mean that they're two different things altogether and the one has nothing to do with the other. You just say the word even though something else is written. Firstly, Rabbeinu Yonah asks, so then why write it differently? And secondly, the very term, yesh aim lemikra, implies there is a relationship between the written word and the pronounced word. The question is simply, which one do we use when there's a contradiction? Which one do we use to extrapolate laws? But certainly the one comes from the other. Do we say the aim, the mother, is the written word and it gives rise to the pronounced word, or vice versa? And we see that idea even in Tosfos, when Tosfos says, "V'nira dedavka hachashi mikra'u mesoret machashi ahadadi itlhu yesh aim lemikra." All of these people who hold that you follow the pronunciation and not the spelling, they all say that only when you can't reconcile the two. They're contradictory. But if you can learn a set of laws from what's written and another set of laws from what's pronounced, you use both. So you see in Tosfos, both are valid. We're not suggesting you follow one and ignore the other. Whether it's aim lemikra or aim lemesoret, it doesn't make any difference. All we're looking at is which is the one, when they're contradicting, which is the one that you follow in order to establish halachot from. But the relationship is there no matter what, and they're both connected. One gives rise to the other. We see that even in the wording of Rashi. If you look at Rashi carefully, yesh aim lemikra batar kriya as linan. That means we follow the kriya. We don't ignore the other. It just means we follow the pronunciation dehi ikar, because that's the ikar. It's not the only one. It's not the one that counts and the other's nothing. They're both valid, but one is more important than the other because it's the aim. It's the one that gives rise to the other, and that's the one we follow. And the Oruch, I've spoken to you about the Oruch before, Reb Nosson from Rome. This is 11th century. It is the first dictionary we have of Aramaic, and it's one of the first dictionaries in the world, probably. One of the early dictionaries in the world, certainly. So he was a Rishon in the 11th century, and in the word aim, he has an entry on the word aim, and he deals with this there, and he says, Ikar davar v'shoresh hu perush aim. It's the root. When it says yesh aim lemikra, this is the root. It's not the one or the other, it's the root and the fruit. And he says, for example, with the Mishnah talks about ha'imahot shel betzalim, rashei betzalim gedelim u'menichim be'eretz la'asot mehem zera. When you put an onion under the ground and it grows into an onion plant, that's called the aim. It's the mother. It gives rise to the other. So we see that relationship exists all the way. So even if you take a word like ki tavo, isha te'ares, v'isha cher yishgalena, you engage with a wife and another man will yishgalena, which we pronounce as yishkavena. Yishkavena means we'll lie with her, we'll have relations with her. That's the klala. What does yishgalena mean? Says Rashi, lashon shegel pilegesh. It's also a word that is specific. The Torah just didn't want to say that. It's too harsh. That your wife will become the concubine of another man. So it says it more subtly. But if you look at so now the question is, so which is the aim? What is the essence of it? Is the essence Yishkavena or the essence is Yishkalena? That's the machlokes. But even in that one, which is one of the most widely separated Keri-Ktivs in the entire Torah, even in that one, says Rashi, and then the Ibn Ezra says it even more explicitly in Tehillim Memhei. The Ibn Ezra explains the connection between this word shagel and the word shachav, and how connected they are. And therefore, when the Brisker Rav says, yes, we're told that there's a way, it's written in one way, and when we read it, it's a different word. It's not This is how you pronounce that word. No, these are two different ideas, related in the form of mother and child, related as cause and effect. But it's not a matter of pronouncing this one. You've got to understand they're two different concepts, and you've got to bring them together in your mind. And so Rabbi Feinstein says also, yes, we're told to pronounce it that way. It doesn't mean you've got to pronounce the shin as a kaf and this. That's not what he means. Clearly, these are two different words. They're two different words, but you've got to be looking at the one word when you pronounce the other, because they've got to come together in your mind. The Baal Kori has to be thinking of both meanings. These are two different meanings, explains the Brisker Rav, and both meanings have to be encapsulated in the mind of the person reading it, which gives us a sense altogether of understanding paradoxes. And it was only yesterday I was learning a piece in the Shmona Kvotzim of Rav Kook, and look what he says. It's so beautiful. We don't have time to explore it, but I'm sure I'm going to reference it many times. Yeshnam hamon machshavot shebetivan einan yecholot liyot omdot zu b'tzad zu. There are many ideas that are irreconcilable. Sotrot ein ze et ze. They contradict one another. Lav davke b'tzidam ha'higyoni ki im b'hayifalut shehin po'elot al haratzon v'al harugashot. Not only in their literal meaning, but even sometimes just on the emotions they arouse in you. One makes you happy, one makes you sad. One makes you angry, one makes you calm. They're just different ideas in the world. V'rak b'derech gvura ruchanit b'tzuyenet. You need a superb spiritual capability. Yuchal adam lavo l'midah zu. You can come to such a level ששום הפך לא יעצור באדום ליתן לליבו את המנוחה והתאמה הראויה. That you can live calmly with these opposites. It's okay. You can have opposites in the world. You can have contradictions in the world. Each one is valid. You're just not sure. You don't understand how to bring them together. Okay, so you don't understand how to bring them together. It doesn't mean one has to be rejected. You can live with both of them if you analyze both and you study both and they're both valid. That's the idea of Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chaim. You can have two opinions in the Torah that are opposite from one another, mutually exclusive, and we say they're both divrei Elokim chaim. They're both God's word. You can live with both of them. They're both valid. ששום הפך לא יעצור בעדו מליתן לליבו את המנוחה והתאמה הראויה ולא יירא משום הצטערות של רעיונות שונות. You get to a point where contradictions don't bother you. What bothers you is that A is a good thought and B is a good thought. I can't put them together. Fine, so they don't go together. That's okay. I'll put one away here and I'll put one away here. Two people explain a piece of Gemara. One explains it this way, one explains it that way. They're irreconcilable, but they're both. I can live with them both. There's no reason for them to ferment anguish when you bring them together. You can live with them separately. And so it is with a Keri-Ktiv, and you can have a lot of fun when we come to a Keri-Ktiv. I think this week's parasha there's no Keri-Ktiv. When you come to Keri-Ktiv in the Torah, just play with it a little bit and watch. Which is the aim? How do you understand? Which is the mother and which is the child that comes from it? Understand the two words being put together, the way it's written and the way it's pronounced. Being able to see them both, and even when they're contradictory, to be able to hold the contradiction, both parts of a contradiction, to be able to hold them both and live with them both, and not necessarily have the needs to bring it together. So how do we deal with contradictory meanings of the multiple contradictory meanings of words? There are times when we have to learn a halacha, and then there's a machloket as to whether it's the pronunciation or the spelling is the dominant one. But what we need to understand is there are two different ideas, two different words that we have to hold together at all times.